Hey guys, Dr. Nate here, and I had the privilege to talk to Merlin Erickson. He is a dental student, was a pre-dent, now he's actually about to get into dental school, and he just wanted to ask me a bunch of questions. So he hit me up a couple weeks ago, asked if he could ask me a bunch of questions, and I said, cool, why not? Let's videotape it. So we did a little Zoom session a couple of days ago. I thought this would be beneficial for everybody, kind of similar to the previous week when we did the dental shadowers, kind of similar kind of feel. So that is this week, and here it is. Here's a video with me and Mr. Merlin Erickson.
Okay.
So I guess the first thing is, well, I mean, obviously, thanks for being patient with me and your patient and stuff too.
No worries.
Trying to get things rolling. Today was, our manager at the location I'm at right now, she decided to have an ortho day today. So today was like a little bit of a special day. So we're giving all these deals and stuff. So there's like tons of stuff. It was definitely our busiest day we've had here, I think, ever. So it's just like basically a madhouse all the time. So I was like, I have that Zoom meeting. I gotta get on. I gotta go.
Well, thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
So why don't you let me get your background a little bit. So I want to know kind of what your deal is and like what your future is and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I am just finishing up at BYU in Utah.
Nice.
And am headed to UOP this July. So that's the real basic, but that's where I'm at. I'm thinking about general dentistry. I'm not set on it. I shadowed an orthodontist and really enjoyed it, but right now the plan is general, and I mean, who knows? I mean, I haven't had the drill in my hand before, so who knows?
Well, you're step number one. You have a great teeth, great smile. So you're there. You're good.
Well, thank you.
So what made you, like, there's always like the question, like, what made you want to do dentistry?
Yeah, so that's I wasn't always interested in dentistry, and it's kind of a long process, but to try to make it short, I spent a couple years in Japan as a volunteer missionary, and there I just noticed how important smiles can be. I'd always grown up in suburbia, and most people went to the orthodontist, and most people had smiles that they were confident about. And then living in, I was away from Tokyo, so kind of just more rural Japan, and not a lot of people went to the dentist or the orthodontist, and started to notice that effect that it had on people. And then I was planning on going into engineering, but couldn't find a career in engineering that I was really excited about. So started looking around, started doing the prereqs for business school. And so I'm a business major, but still couldn't get excited about like tax accounting or anything like that. So started shadowing dentists, and it was something I really enjoyed. So that's kind of how I got there.
I was on a call just yesterday with some pre-dent kids, and I said, like, that's the one thing that I wish we would have learned more. Like, if I could go back, that's what I would have done. I would have learned more business. So the fact that you have a business background is amazing, because in dental school they teach you about that much business. UOP is actually one of the exceptions, so it's cool that you go to UOP. UOP is a great school. There's I have a ton of friends here in Dallas from UOP. There's basically like a big crew of people from California and New York that came to Dallas, or came to Texas, I guess, in general, just because the economy, like in California, is just difficult. New York is super difficult as well. So know a ton of UOP people. I think they actually teach you like a little bit of business. I think when you're going through it, you get like, the basics, which is nice. Because honestly, like, when you come out, if you want to own your own practice, if you want to do like almost anything, like, dentistry is a business. It's just like you're a small business owner, what you are.
For sure.
Yeah. So if you don't like have that basic knowledge, you can still get it. Like, I didn't have any basic knowledge in business, but you can still succeed. It just takes, I think that your a learning curve would be definitely easier if you had this. But let me give you like a little bit of background on me, and then we can kind of
Please.
talk about it a bit. So my background is a little bit different. So I'm actually originally Canadian. So, and I tell this story, I told this before, but it's interesting because there's some things that can happen in life that totally affect everything you do, and it's going to be like that 5 or 10 seconds. So for me, in Canada, you have to take the DAT, and the DAT is basically that, yeah, obviously the entrance exam to get into dental school. But in Canada, there's like this little bar of soap that you need to carve. Totally different, very interesting. I actually think it's a great idea. I'm just like, it's really hard to like grade it and stuff. But anyway, you have to carve out specific portions. So for me, you're carving out like the square and a triangle and like whatever it is, but it's very specific on the numbers. And you're going through the test. Obviously, you're super nervous. You're going through it, you're doing your whole thing. I look at the numbers. I'm like, okay, 16 millimeters by whatever. I'm like, I got it. Cool. I cut it. I'm like, everything's great. And then right after that section, you go and you chill with your friends, and then you're going to go back for the next section. As we get out, everybody remembers the numbers because there's like 10 numbers. Everybody remembers the dimensions. And then they're like, oh yeah, it's like 26 by blah, blah, blah. I'm like, 26? No, it's 16 by something. They're like, no, like it's 26. I was like, oh crap. Like literally that moment, I was like, it's done. Like I'm done. Like there's no, like, that's it. And in Canada, there's only like 5 dental schools in like the whole country. Like ridiculous. And there's only like 20 applicants or 20 people per class. It's super, super, super competitive. So I knew like, hey, I was screwed. The other sections went fine. I was like, hey, I screwed up on that. And I got the grade back. I was like, yep, screwed up on it. I'm screwed. So I could retake it. I think it was like 6 months later or so. Obviously, that's a huge amount of time. But then I'm like, okay, well, I have to retake it because I still want to do this. I retake it. Boom, everything goes well. I'm like, okay, cool. I still have a chance. But it was March-ish, I think, at that point. And I'm like, I'm applying to the Canadian schools. I'm like, here's my good grades. Like, are we good? And they're like, yeah, no, we're only going to accept the first one, and we'll accept the next one for your next round next year. And I was like, oh, whoa, like, okay. So it's like March. I knew most American schools are basically done pretty much, like applications, but I was like, like I got to find something. Like I don't want to wait a year. I just don't want to do this. So I applied to Boston University and USC. I swear it was probably in like the last round of applications. So I like got it in. They saw it like cool. I applied to both, and I was just like super last minute, like what I want to do, like where do I want to go? I was like, do I want to be cold or do I want to go? I've been cold my whole life in Canada. I can go be warm in LA. Sure. And so I did that. And then honestly, it kind of changed my life forever. And I say that because that one moment where I looked at that one number, which are probably like 5 seconds of my life, there was like, okay, cool, carve. And I got that wrong. And I thought my life was like over, but it turned out to be pretty much like one of the best things that could ever happen to me. But because of that, I know I didn't get into the Canadian schools. I went to USC. That's where I met my wife, a ton of great friends. I got to experience California. Now we're in Dallas. It's just been like such an amazing blessing. And yeah, it's like those small things where you just see that and you're like, oh man, that's crazy. Obviously looking at the time, I was like, this is terrible. Yeah. But now it was so amazing. So I went through that. I went to school at USC, and then I was kind of in the same boat potentially as you. I was like, hey, ortho's pretty cool, but like, it's hard to get into dental school already. It's super competitive. Yeah. And then you realize that it's like even more difficult to get into the specialty schools. You already have like, you have your pool of people in high school who are all trying to get into like school. And then from there, you have the college grads trying to get into like a dental program or some version of that. And then from there, you have people trying to get into specialty. So it's like, I was like, I'm not smart enough for this. This is really hard. And it wasn't until probably like the second year, you had to take a boards part 1 exam. And for us at that point, that was it. Like if you do well on that, like you're good. If you don't, like you may have a chance, but it's really tough. And then I ended up doing well on that part. So it's like, cool, like I can do ortho. And originally I was going to come to the States, go to USC, do my 4 years, and probably bounce, go back. Because I did well on that, I was like, I'm probably going to stay a little bit. And then that's when I also met my wife, or my girlfriend at the time. Yeah. And stayed at USC, did USC dental, USC ortho. And by that point, I was like, okay, I'm pretty much American. So Then it's kind of like, okay, what do you do? And I mean, I think, the California market's really tough. You can make it, it's just really, it's tough.
For sure.
And we had some friends in Texas, and we visited for like a couple days. I'm like, hey, this is cool. Then basically came here, and I say all this stuff because there's also like I've been through kind of like a lot of the things that you guys are going to go through. So obviously went through the schooling, but then did corporate. Like I did corporate for 2 or 3 years ish. High volume practices, basically being an employee, and then was like, cool. And I think there's actually a lot of benefits to doing corporate. But then from corporate, we're like, hey, we need to start our own thing. And my wife's a dentist, so it's like we're gonna start an ortho general practice. And then basically from there, we're like, okay, cool. And luckily it went well. And then since then we have 7 practices, and we're gonna keep growing.
So
yeah, so it's like it's just it's interesting because I think with your business background, that can be something where you may be like, business is like, it's interesting, but I'm like, I don't have that passion in business. But when you kind of mix that with dentistry, like your own little like entity and little business, you might get that passion. Like, dude, this is sick. Like, this is really cool. Dentistry is fun too, but like business is really fun. And then that might like propel you into something different. For me, it did for sure. And honestly, it's been like amazing. But yes, that's I'm like, hey, I have the corporate experience, I have like the general dental experience, I have our practice, like just one, and now we have multiple associates, and obviously managing a lot of people. So we've been through kind of like a bunch of different things, and that's why I'm like, hey, cool. Like I want to help as much as I can. A lot of it's just like hard work, working your butt off.
For sure.
But at least there's some things you can be like, hey, this is an easier way to do it. Yeah, that's a little bit of.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And that's your videos on YouTube popped up, so I started seeing those. But then you started talking about how you have the multiple practices, 6, 7. You have your 8th on the way, right?
So we just opened this past month our 7th.
Okay.
Yes, and then obviously this past year was kind of crazy. We opened 2 basically during COVID, which was kind of
I can't imagine
not planned. But I mean, it's honestly been great, especially this last one. Today I'm at our not our most recent one, the one before the most recent, and that was the one that was like just crazy busy. So you've been very blessed, very lucky, and it continues.
Awesome. But yeah, so I saw that and I'm like, well, Dr. Nathan's doing something right. So if I'd be able to pick his brain a little bit, then I'd really like that. Because I do think that I've seen a little bit of the side of dentistry where, I mean, a lot of people say it, but people go into dentistry and they just think I'm going to be the dentist. And I appreciate the patient aspect and helping patients, but then there's the whole other side that is probably more, I'd say more than half. I don't know for sure, but so I think there's a lot of people that not necessarily fall short, but they just don't know what they're getting into. And granted, I don't know what I'm getting into really, but I am interested in trying to scale a little bit. And I think that it's interesting. I have an employer that mentioned, you're going to have to talk about why you're a business major in your interviews, and people are going to think you're just in it for the money. And honestly, the idea that I had was, this is going to help me be able to provide for my patients better, because I'm not going to be getting into situations where I'm not able to meet my overhead. Hopefully, I'm going to have that have that figured out, and hoping that will just be an extension of being able to better treat patients. So
that's actually really, what you're touching on is actually super important. And I think people understand it more now, but it's huge because I know multiple like people think, oh, cool, I'm a dentist, like I'm good, like life is good, like that's it. I mean, if you're working at a corporate job, you're gonna have a ton of patients. It's gonna be, you probably can't do that for your whole life because it's just too draining. But you'll do financially okay. But once you have your own office, there's a lot of people there's a lot of offices, dental offices, that go down because they don't have finances. So when people are like, this is something that we get often, not often, but sometimes, people like, oh, I feel uncomfortable selling. You hear dentists say this more like, I'd say like more of the old school dentists, but like, oh, I don't feel like selling. I'm like, everything we do in life is selling. Like everything. Like if you have a kid, you're trying to sell them on like why you think they should do this or that. If you have a spouse, you're trying to sell yourself and be like, hey, I'm the best catch. Everything is selling. Selling isn't a bad thing. It's just like that's just how we kind of go through things. But think about this: you're selling like the gift of oral health and like beauty. Well, for me, it's like it's braces or Invisalign or whatever it is. So you're selling them this great smile. There's this study that was done that I forget what the percentage was, but when you view somebody, the exact same person who has basically a bad crooked smile versus somebody who has a nice, beautiful smile, they are viewed as more successful, obviously more attractive, more likely to be like their mates. I mean, there's all these things that are showing like how much better you are going to be as a person. And I'm like, why would you not want to sell that? Like that is like amazing. That's amazing.
For sure.
You can show people that passion. Dentistry is different. It's like, hey, I'm trying to sell you health. Like, you could be doing veneers, you can be doing crowns or whatever. But it always strikes me as funny when they're like, oh, they might think you're doing it for money. It's like if you don't think about money, you're done. Like you're done. You need to think about it. And then the people who don't think about that or aren't prepared for that are the ones like the most stressed out because it's like, oh, I didn't have like proper marketing and proper like things in place be a successful business because like I was like, oh, if I just treat patients right, like things will flow. That is not true. If you can treat patients, you can be literally the best, literally the best in the world, but you can be very, 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 very talented and have a practice that sucks. Like that's just how it works. Yeah. Maybe after years and years and years, you might start doing okay, but it just doesn't work like that. If you're somebody who's personable, who can market, who can like have a friendly staff, like dentistry is a small portion of that. Your staff is the one who's interacting with the patients the most. Like if you don't have great staff for them, like even today we're beyond busy, but everybody's still having a good time because it's like a light atmosphere. If you don't have that, it's tough. So that always like kind of gets me when people are like, oh, it's for them. Like we're just doing this for the money. It's like, oh man, like that is going to be a great side effect. And if you do these things, you're going to be financially well. You're going to provide for your family, provide for other people. Like that's amazing. Like why is that? That's not a bad thing. If you're only doing it for the money, then yeah, of course. Like that's
sure.
Yeah, good. But if you're only doing it for the money, you probably shouldn't go to UOP because it's very expensive school. Sure. You probably go to like the cheapest school you can pick up.
For sure. No, I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for it, but especially with like UOP, it's like, well, I know what I'm getting into and excited for it. Definitely, I don't know if wary is the right word, but understanding that it's a lot of money, but I am still excited for the personal aspect and that whole bit of bringing value to people in the form of oral health, because through my experiences in Japan and in other places, I've recognized how important that is to the overall well-being of someone.
And like, I know we touched on this a little bit, like how expensive it is. And UOP, like USC is probably cool. NYU, UOP, they're all expensive. I mean, you're just getting expensive versus expensiver.
Exactly.
But now they have programs that can help you out. Like if you're doing financial aid or whatever you're going to do, like especially now with your administration, I don't know what's going to happen, but they may end up forgiving a lot of these loans after X amount of time. There's all these different ways in order to get those finances. So when people are looking at it, they're thinking, oh my gosh, like this is a lot of money. I'm like, yeah, it is a lot of money. But if you're for this reference sake, say your bills are 5,000, but you're making 15, and cool, life is good. If your bills are 5,000, you're making 4,000, yeah, not so good. So it's all everything's relative. You're doing well enough. It's fine. It doesn't really matter,
For sure. So you mentioned that you were in corporate dentistry for a couple of years before going into ownership. Probably like a year ago, I was super gung-ho into wanting to go straight into ownership. And then I was talking to some dentists and they said, you know what, there is some value to being an associate for a year or two And I just wanted your take on that. What, with having done both, what do you feel like is the best route out of dental school? Because obviously, as an owner, you are able to get a little bit more money to then help pay off loans. But at the same time, that's a lot to bite off right out of school, and the ownership plus trying to do dentistry, I guess, in the real world as opposed to in school. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me ask, do you have a family or no?
I have a wife. Yeah.
Okay, wife. Okay, so no kids though?
No kids.
So I think, I mean, I don't think there's one correct answer because I will have, I knew friends that, well, mainly some pedo friends, pediatric dentists who went straight out of their residency, went into ownership and are doing very, like, very, very, very well. But then I have some other people who did corporate for a little bit and then they're doing their own thing and now they're struggling because it's tough. It depends on where you're at, right? For me, I'll tell you what I did, and I planned it out like this because I thought this was the best way, is I did corporate right off the bat, because when you come out, I mean, you're gonna, come out with some sort of debt, whatever, I don't know what's to be, but you're gonna have some sort of debt. Corporate dentistry is a way to get money like that, so payments are coming in, you're getting money, boom. It's not less, I feel like it's less stressful because you're getting the money right off the bat. And like, I know we talked about this earlier, finances is always that. You don't have money, you have bills coming in. Yeah, you can defer stuff, you can do whatever you can, but you need really to have some sort of income in order to start paying your bills and just stop living like a starving student, basically. Like,
yeah, no, for sure.
Need like noodles every day. So I like that. And not only that, when you come out of dental school, okay, you're going to probably do like, right? You're going to do probably like 15 crowns in a week in corporate, probably like more. So that you just don't know that much. Like when you're first coming out, you're going to learn so much in the first year. Ortho, I was the same way. Like I came out thinking, oh, cool, like I'm good. I felt pretty confident. But yeah, I've seen in corporate or in residency, I've seen like 6 patients a day, maybe, I think something. The first day I get out into corporate, I'm seeing like 70 or 80. It's like you can't compare. Like there's nothing that can compare the amount of volume you'll see in corporate. The beauty of corporate too is like they don't really care. I mean, to be honest, they don't really care who you are. You're just you're just an orthodontist. You do develop some relationships, but they're not coming. Like your name isn't on the billboard or something. They're coming to like whatever corporation they're going to, and there's going to be somebody else coming in, and everybody kind of gets that. That's kind of like the name of the game. So you have like a little bit more leeway. And if you're working with a big corporate, they may have insurances and all this stuff so that you're covered a little bit better. You just feel like you're more protected. So that, for those reasons, that's why I was like, cool, I'm going to learn as much as I can. I'm going to try to know as much of the business as I possibly can. Once I kind of get my feet wet a little bit, I'm going to start looking and start doing my own thing, and then going from there. Hardest, I know people have done this. I think it's really, really, really hard though. The hardest thing you can do is go straight from graduation to a startup. That is like freaking hard. I've seen a couple people do that, but it takes so long to get going. You don't know the business. Like there's so many things, like you mentioned, other than dentistry that go into a business. Like what is dental insurance? What's a deductible? How do you send a claim? Like numbers go on this claim. There's so much information that you just don't know. That's why I think, I mean, honestly, I do the exact same thing. If I had corporate for a year-ish, 2-ish, and start looking for my own thing, and then go. If you have a buy-in opportunity, like you knew somebody and they're like an older dentist is like, hey, I'm gonna leave in 2 years. Like let's do this transition. That would be a different situation. But I also had that same opportunity where there's an experienced orthodontist who wanted me to come on with him. He's amazing, amazing person, amazing orthodontist. Like for most people, I think it'd be a dream. But I was just like, like I want to learn different things, and like I didn't want to be tied down to a specific kind of method that they were doing. And when you own your own, you can really do whatever you want. So yeah, I think corporate's great. I think there's a lot of negatives with corporate, but I think it's positive for the first like year. I mean, my personal thought is just don't get caught up in it forever.
Sure.
There's people that do, and I'm just like, oh, dentistry is too tough to do that. You need to own your own thing. It's really like dentistry is physically very difficult. If you have to physically work in order to make money, then your back is gonna hurt. Your back is gonna hurt. Yeah.
I have heard, and it's like, well, Googled some exercises to try to start doing now. So
Make sure
I don't know how much they help.
Yeah, stay upright, like work out your back and try the best.
Good stuff. Thank you. That was very helpful. So then after you transitioned to doing your own offices,
Yep.
how did you go from like your first office then scaling to where you're at now? I know you said in a couple of your videos you've talked about the importance of dental brokers, but I guess how did you scale? And then like a sub question off of that, I'm assuming that you have a team of people that have helped you, and how have you networked and built that team? Because I recognize that that's incredibly important as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, without a good team, like you can't do anything. So I think, I mean, we're all lucky to be where we are, but I got super, super lucky because the dental broker, Evan Reynolds, if he watches, he's my dental broker.
Okay.
He's the guy who found our first spot. So I saw him at this conference. We kind of struck it up. Really nice guy, and I was like, hey, we're gonna start to look for spots. And he guided me through it. Because same thing, you don't know anything. So he gives me the demographics. He's like, hey, this spot's growing. Like, what are you thinking? What are you looking for? So he basically guided me through that process. Like, hey, I think this is a good spot. This is what we're gonna offer. Yada yada. I was just like, cool, let's do it. And we got super lucky because the very first spot we got ended up doing really well, relatively quick. But it's not all roses. When we first got there, it's a great location, but there's also a pediatric dentist and an orthodontist in the same complex, and who also has other offices. Know what they're doing. They're not over here thinking. And so I was like, oh, it's a good location, but there's another pedo and ortho kind of there. And I'm like, we're general ortho, like we're basically the same thing.
Yeah.
And luckily, it's kind of crazy, but I called up the pedo and I was like, hey, this is potentially going to move in here. Like, I'm doing ortho. And she was kind of like, well, I think it's going to be fine. Like, I think we're going to be okay. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't know. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. And then of course, as we sign it, my friends are like, dude, there's an ortho like right there and like a pedo right there. Like, well, why would you do that? So I was freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. What am I doing? And yeah, it was super stressful. But luckily we opened the doors and people started coming in, and it got busy relatively quick. And because we're like busy relatively quick, I knew, and you may know this too, I knew from like early on, like I didn't want to do one office. I was just like, I don't want to do this. I want multiple offices. Like, that's what excites me. So as soon as we started to do pretty well, I was already looking, because it takes a long time from the time you go, cool, let's get an office, to the time you actually open is like a year for sure. It's a long time, because it takes like a month or two to find a spot. You give your letter of intent, and that takes like a month or two to negotiate. It takes like a month or two to negotiate a lease, and then cool, that finally you get started. It's already like 6 to 7 months. Then it takes like 4 months ish or so to build out, and then you finally get all this stuff. Like, it just takes a really long time. So I knew that, so we started looking, and the next office we partnered with some friends, or a friend, and then basically just kind of started opening, and then had some other friends, and so we have, like, my wife and I have 4 by ourselves, and the other 3 are with. But yeah, it is networking. It's like, once you get to know people, if you're kind of doing what they think is good, people want to start partnering with you, and they want to start opening with you. And yeah, we just got lucky. But if I had to say who would be the core team, sure, dental broker. If you have a good dental broker, I think it's amazing. It boggles my mind. I know people that do this, that it literally, I went to a conference, and I believe this is true. I think the very worst thing you can do is go to wherever you're living and just like drive around and then be like, oh, cool. Like, that could be a good spot to open. It's like the worst, because I mean, you don't know like what the competition is around there. You don't know the ratios. You don't know the demographics. You don't know the numbers. Like, and this is like, you're tied to this business, for a long time. So if you mess up here, I mean, you're messed. So having a dental broker, number one. The other ones I think were important, but I honestly don't think they're like that big of a deal. Like, you have like somebody who's helping you with equipment, helping you build out. We've used multiple builders, multiple banks. So I don't think they're honestly as important, but if you get the right spot and the right numbers, the other stuff can kind of fall into place. So yeah, like I had to pick, I'd say dental broker number one, everything else, it's important, but you can kind of maneuver around it a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. Because I never heard of dental brokers before the couple of videos that I saw you do before. And it just, wasn't on my radar. So yeah, thank you for that. That's, I appreciate that. This is kind of going off in a little bit different. Well, still talking about practice ownership and that, but I know, are there any tax benefits apart from like S Corp? I understand S Corp so generically, but for owning multiple dental practices, that's just something that.
So that's you can tell you have a business background because so few people understand this. Like it's so important. Like if my friends are watching this, or they know like how much I harp on this because I don't pay much taxes, but that's because we're opening offices every year. Basically, we're opening an office every year. So how it works is it depends if you have partners or don't have partners, right? Let's say you are the sole owner of a practice. Say you buy a practice for 500. Depending on who is going, like it changed for a bit, but then it got reenacted like CARES Act. But if you purchase a practice for 500 and you make basically anything less than that, you will write off your full income. You'll pay zero taxes. So that's why, there's people, I mean, that's the business part of it, but obviously a lot of people do this with like real estate. That's another big one. That's how come all these people aren't paying taxes. Like I don't think Trump is because he has some real estate.
Sure.
So the government wants us to open businesses. That's the reason they're giving these tax breaks. We want small businesses to work. So we go, cool, we're going to listen to what they say. We're going to open up these businesses. As long as you're opening them, you get huge deductions. And then you kind of funnel everything through your business, like this laptop that I'm on, it's technically a business expense. I may use it at home a little bit too, but it's fully a business expense. Like, we went to Starbucks and that's a business expense because we're going to get some like Starbucks from somebody else. So everything you do deducts from your full income. So when people, and like it's so important, but it's so hard to know until you're in the game. It just affects like everything. Like if you think about it, let's go for a round number. If you're making 100 and you get that fully deducted, then you just need to make 100 to get 100 in your bank account if you get full deduction. But if you are paying taxes on that, you need to make at least 130. If you're in Cali or New York, you're probably going to need to make like at least 150 to have 100 in your bank account. Like it's like such a huge difference. But people don't look at taxes that much. I always tell people, what is your biggest expense? There's only one answer: taxes. Always your biggest expense. You need to think about that whenever you're doing, like if you're doing business, if you're doing investing, if you're doing like everything, you have to think about taxes.
For sure.
We don't have like our accountant, I think, is great. He's awesome, but he's not like doing anything crazy. He's like, oh, you guys are opening businesses, so here's your massive deduction. People were like, how are you not paying much taxes? I'm like, well, we're opening the business like every year. Like that's why. But yeah, so it's a huge advantage to open a business. So if you make 100 as associate versus 100 or whatever it's going to be as a business owner, hands down business owners.
Interesting. I do that with real estate, but I hadn't put two and two together with just opening a business and how that whole thing can be a tax write-off.
Huge. Yeah.
That's interesting. My pen just ran out of ink. Can I go grab
go for it.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I had one close by. So okay, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Because I've heard enough people say that, I mean, if you're smart about it, then you can really have taxes work in your benefit. And it seems pretty powerful to be able to
it's
understand those.
It's just like everything. Like yeah, everything in relation to loans, like everything, interest rates on things, like you're deducting interest. It's everything is taxes. You know, the more you understand, the better. I used to read like all these random tax books just to get better knowledge of it. I mean, just to be like, okay, it's just making sense what we're doing. You know, obviously, I love reading, so I read like all the time. But I do think knowing that stuff, although it can be very dry, I think it's still. I mean, it's important.
For sure. But so then you said that you just have kind of just a dental accountant. Do you have someone that you feel like is really well versed in taxes, or is it more so your personal research?
Yeah, it's me researching, but I think our accountant's pretty good. Like I think it's pretty good. But we don't do anything like super unusual. There's people that will have like multiple corporations doing different things like that. There's people who have like specific tax accountants, like taxes. There's other things you can get. Like Kane Waters is a big one in Dallas. They're actually they're not international. They're nationally known. Kane Waters is like an advisory, a massive one, mainly involved in like I think medical and dental. But they will tell you like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is you need to have this corporation to do this and this and this. But you also pay them a pretty penny. You're gonna be paying them like, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 grand a month just to advise on things. Like, hey, is this worth it? Like some people it is because they're like, hey, I can save more than that doing it. But then some people are like, my situation's not that complicated.
Yeah.
You know, if you're an employee and or you have one office, like what are you really gonna do? So I don't have anybody that's like that amazing, but I don't feel like we're missing out on things just because we haven't, honestly, we've been very lucky not to pay the good taxes. But there, I do know that there are some people.
Interesting. Well, thank you. That's a good insight.
Yeah.
How do you have a number of offices you want to get to that you feel like, hey, this is my goal, or is it just kind of, hey, just keep growing until we feel comfortable?
I when we first in ortho residency, they make us write goals. Like they're like, hey, what's your goals? Because I do think goals are powerful. Like if you have a goal in mind and it's like pretty consistent, it's in front of you, and you are motivated, you'll do whatever you can to reach those goals. My goal in ortho is 5, so obviously succeed that. So the problem, and I'm big into this stuff, like big into self-development and all these different things. And the one issue is if you have like one specific goal, which I think is still important. Once you attain that goal, you kind of go like, oh, like what now? Like kind of like the what now thing, like, oh, I did this, like, is that it? So our goal is this, my goal now is to basically kind of keep growing as long as I get fulfillment from it. That's the biggest thing. So, like we mentioned before, finances is cool. Having more money is cool. That's yeah, it's good. But like, I'm not like, oh my God, I'm going to open 10 more practices so I can make this amount of money so I can like buy this car. Because like the ends don't justify that for me. If there comes a time, and honestly, with this last office, it was stressful to open it. And I was like, damn, do we want to do this? Like, we don't really need to do this anymore. Like, is it worth it? And then you kind of get it going and like, oh, this is actually really fun. Like I could do another one. So as long as we're growing and it's fun, we're going to keep growing. Like my end goal probably now thinking about is like more around like 30 or 40, but who knows, may open the next one and be like, peace, like this is it. This is done. The other hard thing is you see, this is more in the dental field, so you probably guys don't see this, but you see all these, not all these people, very, very select people who have accumulated a lot of offices. They're getting to like 30s, 40s, 50s, or maybe more, like 100, and then they sell to a venture capitalist company, and then all of a sudden they're like, you're doing super well, you're getting percentages or multiples of your profits. They call it EBITDA. It's all these different things. Where all of a sudden they're making like big money. And I thought about that too. Like, would that be cool, like to catch out? But obviously things always change. But I honestly, if my staff watches this, I love working with them. Like I love growing with them. I want them to grow. Like that's one of the reasons we actually do this, because I'm like, I love watching them grow. I love like just working with people. I like having the control of everything too. I think once you do that, you kind of lose it a little bit. And like, sure, getting that big chunk of cash would be fun. Like, yeah, if you're watching this and you're a student, you're probably like, oh, I wish I was making like good money. But once you make past a certain amount, it's definitely not that. It's just like, hey, what fulfills you? What makes you happy? Who do you want to be around? There's all these different. Yeah, I have like an overall goal in mind, but probably once I start to get closer to that goal, I'm going to do another goal, because I don't want to attain that goal and not have another one ready, because that's when I know it's not good. I was like, oh.
For sure. And I'm sure it just comes back to the why, right? That you've talked about, like start with why with Simon Sinek, and I'm sure that it comes back a lot to that.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's a great speaker. That guy. Yeah,
he really is, and his book is fantastic.
Yeah.
I had a couple more questions. One of them actually was ask if you had book recommendations, but we'll come to that later.
Yeah. Sure.
So saw that you went to USC, ended up going to Texas. Are there anything besides state income tax and the dentist to patient numbers that you've talked about a little bit that you would recommend looking into when figuring out where you want to start opening practices? I'm from Minnesota and am not planning on going back. My family's not originally from there, so once my parents retire, they're going to be leaving. So not a draw out there. I don't want to stay in California. I don't have any draws to California. So after school, I won't be staying out there. So it's pretty much, we're like open for whatever. Like I've enjoyed Texas, and you don't pay tax, the income tax in Texas. But are there any other important aspects to that formula that you would recommend besides the income tax and the dentist to patient numbers?
So to be honest, like when we first moved out here, obviously we realized like, hey, financially we're going to be better off in Texas, but we wouldn't have come out here without knowing friends because I do really think like as much as, money and stuff is important to strive and to help family and all that stuff. I mean, if you're not having a good time while you're doing it, like who cares really? We had, it would have been, I'm sure there's other states we could have gone to that would have been maybe even better because Texas, I mean, there's so many people flooding in Texas. Like it is insane how much is growing here. Which means also Dallas is getting more competitive, getting more difficult. I'm sure we could have went to other states and probably did better, but in the end, we want to have good support network with friends. We want there to be stuff to do because we come from Los Angeles. We can't go to like the middle of nowhere. We're gonna go crazy. So we wanted to be entertained. We knew there's a lot of dentists here that we could like hang out with. So those are honestly bigger factors to me than straight up like just numbers. And like obviously numbers comes into play because if it had zero to do with money and zero to do with numbers, we probably would have stayed in LA. Probably, maybe. I think, I don't know. If money was not a factor at all, maybe we would have. But just the combination of everything, there's not like people also like ask like, what does it take to be successful in something? It's not like, oh, it's one thing. It's like you're doing all these things, to help you be as successful as possible. Same thing when you're making these decisions. It's not like, oh, we had friends, that was it. It's like, oh, we had friends that were here. We knew it was going to be good financially. Honestly, the weather is pretty good, minus like July and August when it's like scorching hot. There's a lot of different factors, but yeah, I mean, having the support network was good. I'm the same thing as you. Like, I'm Canadian, so I wasn't going to move back to Canada. My wife is from California, born and raised, but we knew we weren't going to really stay there, so we didn't have like a ton of ties anywhere. So yeah, you're going to be in the same boat. You're just going to have to find somewhere where you think is cool and go for it, and then also realize that hey, if you don't like it, you can always move. It's not the end of the world. Like you can stay somewhere for 6 months and be like, damn, this place sucks. And then you're like, I'm gonna move somewhere else. Like nothing is that permanent. Like nothing is really that permanent. And we get caught on that where it's like, oh my God, like it's such a huge decision. It's like, yeah, it's important and you don't want to be like moving all over the place. But if you truly don't like something, you'll move, you'll change it. It might not be good financially because you're gonna have to like do something, but I mean your sanity and happiness is more.
For sure. That's awesome. Thank you. For someone in my position about to go into dental school, are there any recommendations you have for understanding? Because like you said, dental schools don't teach you a ton about the business side of things and how to run a dentist. So you can stay open, so you can actually treat patients. Is there any recommendations you have of things to start looking into? Like for example, I've started to run like Google and Facebook ads for dental practices to try to understand that side of the like marketing. So at least chances are I won't be doing it myself, but just so I can speak the lingo a little bit. Is there anything like that you'd recommend, or just something to try to start progressing in that aspect?
I mean, honestly, the fact that you're doing that is insane, and that's so amazing. That is so amazing. Okay, so right now, I myself am running Google Ads, Facebook. My wife's doing Pinterest. We're doing it all ourselves. That's it.
Yeah.
We don't have anybody else doing it. The only reason we're doing that is because you're right. If you don't know, and like, how do you know? Like, they'll tell us like, oh, we get X amount of patients from Google, and like there's forms. I'm like, okay, how much are we spending? Do we know like where this is making sense? If you have a great marketing team, it can be good because you don't want to have to do everything yourself. But I realized after a while, I was like, like they're not doing them, they're doing an okay job, but I think we could do better. And it was because of COVID that I basically started doing that. I was like, we designed our own website. Like, that's our website that we made it. I started obviously doing more YouTube. We're doing Google ads, Facebook ads, all these things that they weren't actually doing Facebook ads. And I was like, Facebook ads are amazing. They're cheap, way cheaper. You get great results. I was like, why are we not doing this? But it's because they weren't into that. That wasn't their thing,
Yeah.
So I think number one, the fact that you know that and you're doing that is insane. That's amazing, because you probably at the start will do it for yourself. Probably. You might want to do like your own Facebook ad. There's so much stuff like initially, because you're just trying to get by, you're probably going to do yourself. And then you realize, hey, is this cool? Do I want to keep doing it? Or no, do I not like it? Like for me, I still like that stuff. I like tinkering with stuff. The creative is so important. Like for us, if you've seen our website, if you've seen our stuff, like we're very succinct with our creative, and we don't, it's really, really, really hard if you go, hey, Billy, can you make me this website that looks exactly what I want it to look like? It won't happen, because every time you need to tweak one thing, you want to just be able to oh, I want to move this here and move this here. But when you're dealing with somebody, it's like basically impossible. So we want to have the ultimate control over everything. Once you get it, then you can kind of give it to other people if you need to. But yes, number one, I think if you're doing that, amazing. You're getting the marketing. Marketing is basically everything. If you know marketing, you're going to probably do well. I think the more you can talk to, honestly, probably people like me or other dentists or orthodontists who you think may be what you want to do, if they have multiple practices, if that's what you're thinking of, just trying to pick their brain a little bit. Just because even if even if you're in Dallas and you're like, hey, Nate, can we go meet up for dinner or something like that? Cool, we've met already. So I'm okay, it's cool. And then you can kind of network with that way. Anything you can to kind of keep working, I think is important. And I mentioned this, now you're in dental school, so it's a little different. But if you can do anything just to get that more business knowledge background just a little bit, if you can do some classes, or if there's a business group or whatever, just to get that, because you're going to be bombarded with science and dentistry, and you'll have that coming out of your ears. That's not going to be an issue. Getting more of the businessy and how to be successful once you get out, that's going to be the important parts. I mean, you're gonna do well. I tell, because you're already thinking about these things. You're thinking about the business aspect. You're thinking about, hey, maybe what should I do? We're talking. I mean, when I was getting into school, I was just oh, thank God I'm in. It's that's pretty much it. And then I kind of found my rhythm after a while. The fact that you're thinking about this stuff already is okay, cool. You're kind of gonna have a direction a little bit, and then you're just gonna find out what things that you enjoy. If you enjoyed Facebook ads and stuff, head of 99% of dentists out there, because there's so many people that don't do that or don't know that. There's people who don't even have websites. How do you not have a website? It's insane.
Honestly, though,
insane.
It's wild.
I'm especially now, you can probably go on Wix and make a website for $5. It'd be decent, I was how do you not have one? I think it's a different age. They used to, I think a long time ago, you could just open up and be good. But now it's hey, that's just not the reality. If you want to live in a normal city, that's not the reality. If you want to live in Timbuktu in the middle of nowhere, cool, you can probably not do any of this stuff and be okay. But nowadays, you
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, we'll do. We'll do. It's like you said, it's fun to do. It's just a little puzzle, and so it's fun. It's fun.
It's cool.
So one last. Oh.
I was gonna say, it's cool because you're doing this, so you can know for us, when we do it, we'll have two different creatives. I'm hey, this is gonna be cool. My wife will be this is cool. I'm okay, well, we're just gonna compare it. Is my design better? Your design better? How's it gonna work? And you just do it, and you're like, oh, people like this, and you're like, oh, okay. But if you're not in control of that, you just have no idea. They're just gonna toss something up there and be like, okay, spend a couple $1,000 on this. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, you just don't know, you know. So nice
Exactly.
that you have that. And people think it's so hard. I'm like, you know, it's not that hard once you get the hang of it. Like initially,
Mhm.
it's really complicated, I think, but
Yeah,
once you get the hang of it, it's like,
for sure. For sure. And just one last thing, you in previous videos you've mentioned like E-Myth Revisited and Start with Why. Are there any other business books that I've read both of those? Are there any others that you'd recommend?
man, I'm reading like so many. I love reading. Like I read every day. Um, okay, so Tony Hsieh is the founder of Zappos. So
Okay, yeah,
unfortunately, he just passed
he did.
recently. I think he's a pretty eccentric type of fella, but his people would fly from everywhere to go into Zappos to see the Zappos, you know, the area. His books, Delivering Happiness, is amazing. It's just like good how they basically grew their culture. One thing I also love listening to is hearing other entrepreneurs or business owners go through this struggle, because it is like I know it's, especially like with my staff and stuff, they're like, oh, it seems so easy. I'm like, it is very very hard. It's so hard. So when you can hear other people who have, like, you know, he sold to Amazon for like $1 billion, so like you see
Yeah,
these like massive companies just like, oh, like they went through too. Like there's a point where he thought they were not going to make it. He's like selling off his condo in order to like make salad or make payroll for the next like month or so. You know, there's all this crazy stuff. Like, wow, people go through this too. Like, I haven't had to experience that, so like I'm blessed, you know. But his book is great, so I just love hearing about that. There's two I've recently got recommended to me, and they're super super easy reads. And this might not be amazing for you right now. It'll probably be better in the future. But one I'm reading and rereading again is The 1 Minute Manager, and it
I've heard that
is
one.
great. It's very, very good. It basically tells you or shows you and helps you learn the proper ways, probably the better ways to manage people. Because once you get beyond like honestly having like a couple employees, it's so much just like you're managing people who manage people, like, or yeah, I mean, you may be directly interacting with people, but you have to just get like these teams and know how to manage and how to make them productive. Because if you're not going to be there most of the time, so you need to make sure like systems are running and things are running smoothly. But be able to manage people is important. The 1 Minute Manager, like, it's so succinct. I'm like, this stuff is genius. I'm like, why are we not doing this? It's really really good. The last one I'd say is super super easy to read too. These are all three of these are pretty easy. Is Who Stole My Cheese? And it's also by the same author. I forget his name. It's like something Spencer, I believe. Spencer Johnson, I believe. But it's another kind of like a funny, this is a short story of these two mice and these two like humanoids going through a maze, and they have to find this cheese and stuff. But it's all related back to like life and business and how we can get so stuck on like we find this big, like, you know, so say I get stuck at our first office and thought like, hey, this is it, like I don't need to do anything more. And then what if that office goes down? It's like, that's life. Like things change, you know, things change. Like it may be super awesome now and may be productive and making money off of that, but that may change, and you better change with it, because life is not gonna, like, nobody's gonna tell you like, Merlin, come on, like I'm gonna grab you and like we're gonna go to the next thing. Like that doesn't happen. If you're waiting for somebody to like grab you and go to your goals with you, like that's never going to happen. So it's like it's a funny like play on that. Yeah, so those three, I mean, I have a ton of those three are like the ones I read the most recently that I'm like, oh, these are really good. Actually, one last one is Atomic Habits. Atomic
Atomic
Habits.
Habits.
That's a great one too, because it shows you how to, we're basically, all we are is we're kind of like our habits over and over again. Like we only use our consciousness like, you know, 10% of the time. The other 90% of the time is just like things we do over and over again. So to be able to kind of control your habits and like, oh, I'm going to make this my habit and that's going to be who I am. I think that was a pretty powerful book too. I've also rereading that one as well. Yeah, there's a few that like I'm like, oh, this is good, like I need to reread it.
Awesome. That's perfect. Thank you so much. I enjoy reading as well, and you can get a lot from books. My wife has taught me that. She's a bigger reader than I am, so I'm trying to make that a bigger part of my life. Perfect. Thank you. That's the majority of the questions. I think I hit everything.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Everything,
Yeah. I think thanks again for doing this. I think this is fun. I think it's like I said, if there's anything else I can do to help out, if you're in Dallas or whatever, just let me know. But yeah, man, I think you're gonna crush it. So I don't think it's gonna be an issue. Dental school is gonna be tough. It's not gonna be easy, but I mean, in the end, it's gonna absolutely be
perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, please reach out. I know that there's obviously, being a student, there's not a lot, but if you want a perspective of any of your videos or whatever of a current student or something, I'm more than happy to share whatever. So
I appreciate it.